Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Martin at Wintergatan for giving us this inspiration for this project with his original Marble Machine X, and the Marble Machine in the works.
We started this project all the way back in December of 2023, prototyping marble droppers to see if we could even build a machine that could play something like a beat.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Wintergatan's marble machines, they're 100% mechanical contraptions making music by dropping marbles. It's all powered by a hand crank which turns a programmable wheel, telling the marbles when to drop. Just to set your expectations, this machine will be playing only drums and it won't be playing them well. This project was meant to be more of an engineering challenge than a musical instrument, and it was a challenge indeed.
We started by making a flywheel to smooth out the imperfections of the hand crank. We installed 8mm bearings to make it all run smoother, which were unreasonably hard to source because our local hardware store was always out of stock. In fact, nearly 2 years later, I believe they still are.
Then, we created the structure which would support all of the weight of the components of the machine. I'm not sure why we did this after we made the flywheel, but that is pretty representative of how the rest of the project went.
There are two main sections of the base structure, one for the flywheel and the other for the programming wheel. Everything else just sort of sits on top or beside them. We added the 4 legs to the base, then installed the flywheel and started to balance it out. We smoothed out the rotation further by sanding down the edges of the flywheel with a Dremel.
For the machine to work, we need a lot of gears to transfer motion from one part to the next. We'll need 2 gears to go from the crank to the flywheel to increase its speed. Then we'll need 4 from the flywheel to the programming wheel to slow it down so that it doesn't play marbles at a record pace. I glued down paper stencils of these gears to a particle board like wood so that we could cut them out with a jigsaw.
Here we're installing the 30-tooth gear that will be powered by the crank, increasing the gear ratio of the 8-toothed gear which spins the flywheel. Luke found a random piece of wood in his garage that served as the handle for the crank.
Like the flywheel, we used bearings on the 30-tooth gear to keep it smooth. However, we also had to find a way to secure it. So we made a 3D model of a bearing clamp, which bolted into the gear while clamping down on the bearing. We also started to make a marble elevator, which circulates the marbles after being played from the bottom to the top of the machine. I built this out of Lego Technic using tank treads and sprockets. However, after just prototyping, I needed the Lego for a school project, so I ended up having to redesign it a couple of times. Towards the end of January 2024, I started to make the programming wheel. I found an old pallet lying on the side of the road, which I deconstructed by tearing off the supports.
This is when the project started to take a long time, because for us, school had just started again, and that took up most of our time. This is the last gear we needed to cut, but it sure did take a lot of time, because we had to cut each of the 52 teeth out with the jigsaw.
So we now find ourselves in mid-2024, and we haven't even started installing the marble droppers or the marble tracks. However, it was rewarding to see some things coming together and some processes starting to work. For example, I installed the programming wheel and its axle and clamped the two together, and it started to look like a marble machine.
Skip forward to the end of 2024, and we decided to redesign the marble gate. The problem with the old one was that it kept yeeting marbles out instead of simply dropping them. We designed this iteration with less friction and more gravitational force on the marbles so that they would naturally want to drop when allowed.
Finally, it was time to install the marble gates, so I created a cardboard mock-up of the structure, then replaced it with more side-of-the-road wood.
We put in structural wooden dowels to mount the marble gates on and carefully installed them with everything lining up.
Finally, we created the marble tracks, one on the top and one on the bottom of the machine, to catch the marbles after they'd been dropped. For the top track, we attached plywood to the marble elevator and marble gates and added the walls so that the marbles wouldn't fall out. For the marble catcher, we did the same, just adding felt so that the marble's impact wouldn't be so loud.